Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today we're joined by the lovely Nicky Harverson from Active Gloucestershire. Nicky, welcome, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Laura Jane. How are you?
I'm very well, very excited to have you on.
Good.
Nicky is the strategic lead for children and young people at her organisation and is a physical activity specialist. Nicky's main coaching passion centres around cycling though, and she's the chairperson of Cheltenham Town Wheelers. So Nicky, I want to start by asking you, as someone leading on this in a county organisation and coaching outside of that too, what is it about Play Their Way as a coaching concept that first piqued your interest?
So I guess when you go out every week on the park, as we call it, and coach the children, you draw so much from them. And I tend to get the energy from them and then set my coaching sessions week in and week out from that. And I've been doing that for a while. And then something like Play Their Way comes on and you start to hear the podcast, see the resources come through, and you go, that's me. I do that. And there's a sense of pride in that. But equally, when I put my work hat on, it's not a surprise. And it's really important that we put children at the first and foremost at our coaching.
As somebody who is looking at kind of the analytics of sport in your county environment and in the organisation, did you have maybe a bit of a frustration that you realised you were perhaps an outlier in the way that you were coaching, that you were not so much centering children but centering play and enjoyment in the way that you went about business as a coach?
Yeah, I think a couple of years ago, it almost like they were separate things. So I'd go into my day job and look at it from a data perspective. Look at you hear the statistics from Active Lives. You look at Youth Sport Trust giving their data out, and you just quote statistics to be able to get some money to put an intervention on to be able to then deliver something. And I guess it was a few years ago, and I just wanted to say stop. Actually, this is great because it means we get money and we get the work done. But actually, what's the work? And you really have to then cycle back around and go, wow, so the work is this. And the work is local. And we do, at Active Gloucestershire, we do a lot of place-based work. And that was really powerful to me. I started out doing women and girls mainly and doing a project with a local community around cycling, funnily enough. But that was really my first foray into actually those women were at the heart of the work. And as I started to understand that more and started to develop my sort of person-centered approach to work, and now I start, now it's everything. Young people are at the heart of our work. So as you say, I'm the lead for children and young people in Gloucestershire. Everything centres around those young people. And actually it centres around one young person. And if we centre it around that one person, then we get it right for all of them because we inherently think about them in that way.
How much do you think we've overlooked play in the way we've approached coaching and sports strategy with children and young people in recent times?
I think it's been really overlooked in that we tend to focus on creating mini versions of those athletes we see on the TV. And I know that, those children, young people will come wanting to be that person, but generally, in the greater scheme of things, only a very few are going to make it to the very top of their sport. And the powerful thing about play is that it includes everybody, even those who want to progress to the higher elite levels of sport. But most importantly, it includes all those young people who show up week in, week out and put in the time on the park, whatever they do. And we lose so many children because we don't make it fun. We don't create those positive experiences, that welcoming space for them. And that is the key. So play is inherent in that, but you offer a welcoming space, you create a positive experience. Play is just the underlying factor of all that.
So do you think it's less a case that we've forgotten play in the way that we've gone about coaching and strategizing sport for young people, and it's more that we've gone to this kind of results-based system and we're treating children, participants, as athletes?
I think so. Whenever you read studies about, what children want, it all goes back to having fun. Yet, as coaches, when you go through your formal framework of learning how to coach, you break down skills and you learn how to stand at the front of the room or the front of the, in the park in front of the children and tell them what you want them to do. And then you have very few moments to actually sit back and reflect on the session, in the session. And I think that way of educating coaches needs to change. And I know it is. I know there's a lot of work there at the moment. But it's also nurturing those coaches whilst they're in the moment, partnering with someone. A lot of coaches are solo. They work on their own. They're isolated. So they don't have others to sort of bounce ideas off. And I think in creating spaces for coaches to develop, we will see more play come into those sessions.
So actually on the podcast, we've talked a lot about the kids and giving them the tools, but it's about coaches and them not operating, I guess, as silos in this environment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. It's really hard. If you do anything on your own, you've got nobody to really, as I say, bounce ideas off. You've got no one to chat to and say, did that work? Did that land? And you also don't create time to sort of say to those children, did that work for you? And if you're not asking them if it worked for them, they're never going to tell you. They'll walk with their feet, i.e. they won't come back, and you'll never hear from them again. So as a coach, it's about trying to lean into those spaces in those sessions to get that feedback. If you're next to another coach, you can almost create the space to get that feedback instantly. Change the session, do whatever you need to do next. I've been in sessions where I've had a coach, I was doing some coach development work, and I had a coach looking at me saying, this isn't working. What's not working? And I sort of looked and said, well, I don't know. Let's ask them when they come back in. And the fear on their face, I'm going to ask the riders? Like, yeah, let's ask them what's not working. They'll know what's not working. And, essentially, she's looked at me and went, can you role model that, please? Like, yeah, of course. But if that was them on their own, they wouldn't have had that role model. They'd have had to just get on with it. And likely they would have come back and set something else for them to do and not lean into asking those riders what wasn't working, what wasn't landing for them, and how could it be better before sending them out again. And as it was, I was able to model that, got the riders back in, said, right, something's not working, guys, what is it? I had 4 or 5 voices then coming back at me. This isn't working, that isn't working. It's okay, so let's come up with some ideas. What could we change? You know what we're doing. Let's do this, let's do that. Okay, off you go, let's try it again. And off they went, and all of a sudden it's working, whatever it was we were doing at the time. But being able to role model that for them was really powerful. Like I say, if you're in isolation, working solo, that doesn't happen. So we need more of that.
It's so strange, isn't it, when we consider that as coaches we're being told and as teachers to self-reflect and ask ourselves what we think is going right and going wrong in sessions, when the most obvious thing when we step away from it is to ask those people that we are coaching. So, I mean, I plug it every week, but there is the questionnaire available on the Play Their Way website, which I'll give you the address for at the end of the podcast, that you can pass out to the children and young people that you're coaching to get their feedback on sessions. Play Their Way is obviously about more than play, though. It's about a child-first approach to coaching and participation. How does that work in practice for you?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
So for me and for us at the club where I coach, it starts with creating a space for them to join us and play before the coaching session starts. They help set up the course that we're going to be riding around. They maybe just grab some kit out of the back of the trailer and have a little play. And then we'll all sort of warm up together and set off. And we'll explain what we're going to do. We'll have a boundary sort of structure of what we're going to do, which generally has come from what they wanted to do last week, but we'll have a structure. And throughout the session, we will keep rolling back to, is this working? What's happening next? And that kind of continual feedback loop between coach and riders is really important. And we start somewhere and it could go anywhere. That's really our kind of philosophy. And then toward the end, we'll look at, what have the smiles been like today? Have we seen a lot of smiles through the session? That's our kind of barometer for success. And we'll look at when we finish the session just to wrap up with, well, what was today like? Did you have fun? What wasn't so much fun? What are you going to do next week? What do you want us to go away and plan? What are you going to go away and plan? And what are you going to come back with next week? And so we kind of finish and wrap up like that. So I guess it's inherent in everything that we do as we go through the session, and it just builds week on and week in.
What I love about your answer there is one of the first things you talked about was boundaries and structure. And I think there's a fear from a lot of coaches that a child-first approach means that goes out the window. So how have you successfully built those into your group so that they know what's appropriate, what they're allowed to do, but they're still feeling like they're in control of the sessions and that they're not being told what to do continually?
I think for us, it's really around keeping them included and listening to what they want to do, but also it's observing what they do. So as coaches, we tend to want to talk the whole time, but actually the most powerful tool we have is our observation. And if we can stand back just quietly and observe, you'll see those children that push the limits for themselves and those that don't. And understanding that children, they know their limits or limiters, whatever that might be. And as a coach, that's the real power there, is if you stand back and just simply watch them, you'll know what they want to do and how far they want to take it. And then you can start building those sessions around it. We were talking beforehand about Party at the Pump Track, which we have on a Wednesday night in the spring. And that's a great place just to simply observe, because you are watching the children just play on the pump track. But you'll see those that want to progress to jumping the tabletops, to those who are struggling with just the rollers and getting over with their feet in the wrong position and feeling uncomfortable and not very confident about it. So you can build some skills on those sessions, because we don't coach at those. It is literally a party. But then we know what we can then take back to the park, and we can create spaces for them to learn through play how to hold their feet. And then the next Party at the Pump Track, they're doing it for themselves, and they're going around the whole thing, and then they feel just super proud of themselves and heading off telling their parents or their mates that, like, what I did. And that's just gold. I'm
going to come back to Party in the Pump Track, because aside from anything else, I want an invite to the next one. But one thing that you talked about when you said the way that you run your sessions is that you start with play. Now, I think when I look back to any kind of sporting involvements as a child, be that through school PE or external sport, play was the reward at the end. So at what point did you recalibrate that? Because that's the tradition. That's the way sports always run. So at what point did you think, if we give them a bit of free play at the beginning and start on that note, we're going to have a more successful session from that point out?
Well, it came from observation. So when we came out of lockdown in 2020, 2021, and we were allowed to sort of come out again and coach, we were one of the first clubs back. I did everything possible to get back out in the park and do all the things to keep them all safe and 2 metres apart and so on. Do you remember those days? And what we noticed was the children had lost the joy of connection. And so for most of the session, they just wanted to chat to each other. And so we had gone back with our traditional, this is how we start, and this is how we go do our middle bit, and this is how we end with play in a game. And we soon realised that actually they needed to connect first. And so we brought in our kind of like 2 or 3 minutes of chat, reconnect, and just, before we sort of get on with the session. And that's now developed to about 15 minutes of play before they start. And that's really just grown based on just seeing what they want. And they're getting earlier and earlier to the sessions, actually. But we do put in a 15-minute set time where, they can come in, sign on, take stuff out of the van, go anywhere on the park as long as we know where they are, and basically just mess about on bikes.
When we're talking about teens, do you find that emotionally that affects the session, because you've almost brought them up and you can keep them up there for the session by giving them free play from the outset?
Absolutely. They just needed to talk to each other. They hadn't seen each other for a week, because most of them aren't at the same schools. This isn't a school club. This is a community club. So They all go to different places, and they're all different ages. Let's actually recognise that, because we've got sort of 12 and 13-year-olds and 16 and 17-year-olds in the same group, but they all get along.
Yeah.
It's not that, oh well, you're not in my year.
Yeah.
But they all just get along. They look after each other,
Mm-hmm.
and so that 15 minutes of free play, of just doing whatever they wanted, has created those bonds and those connections that we're really missing. And it serves a purpose for us as coaches, because we can settle in and just see what is going on. Which emotions are heightened, who's not engaging, and why might that be? And we can go and just stand next to a couple of them and say, oh, you're not getting involved today. What's up?
Yeah. How
you doing? And they might just be, oh, I'm just really tired of a long week. Oh, that's okay. And then you can have a chat. And again, it's just getting to know what's going on in their lives. And it's really important, I think, as a coach, to really understand where your participants are coming from.
Have you found through a child first approach and children having more self-advocacy through your sessions that they are finding it easier to talk to coaches as well? Are they being tooled in that side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I talked about this, I think, on one of the UK Coaching Learning Labs. We've had to enable our children to find their voice because they didn't know they had one. If you'd ask them what they wanted to do next week, they would go, I don't know. And there would be silence. And you'd be teasing out the detail from them. Now I've got 100 voices coming at me, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. The power of their voice as they learn how to use it. It's just the best.
We've talked previously on the podcast about the UN rights of the child, and voice is one of them, and they do sound like these really big ideals, but actually it's as simple as that. It's just asking them at the end of a session, what is it that you want to do next week, and then having the ability and the confidence to be able to feed that back into you, isn't it?
It is that simple. Sorry. It is that simple. You've got young people who want to share, want to be heard, but sometimes don't know how to. Mm-hmm. We don't have anything like putting your hand up.
Yeah.
There's no, can I have permission to talk, please? There is an open, at any time through the session, if there's something not going right for you, just come and talk to one of the coaches, or one of the young leaders, or, even to your parent, who then feels super comfortable to come and tell us that something's not right. Because of course they're going to go to their parents and tell them something's not right. But we're also empowering those parents to come back to us and say, something wasn't right for them. What can we do then as a club to make sure that it is right next time? And that's really important, because if we aren't learning, we don't understand what's going on, we aren't learning, and we aren't making the changes that we need to as coaches.
Mm-hmm. I've been really excited about us having you on, because I know you've been supporting us through the launch of a pilot programme to get more coaches using a child first approach. You've been a mentor with that. So how have you found that?
It's really exciting, actually, to start thinking about how this national approach, this campaign, a movement, can be bottled down into something that is local.
Yeah,
it's really important for me in my day job. We work at a level of policy, strategy, understanding how our county develops and delivers to young people. And it is a bit of a challenge, I guess, for us to how do you take a campaign like Play Their Way and make it real for coaches and for young people. So it's been a joy to be a part of it. It's been, for me internally, it's been a complex issue to kind of unpick, because it's never going to be easy. No. We've got 3.5 million coaches in the country, and some of them will absolutely be champions of Play Their Way. Some of them may not even know it, but they are.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a huge number who don't yet know about this. And it's those people that don't know about it that we want to kind of target, or for me, in our county, how we target them.
So if that's 3.5 million in the UK, we're targeting all of them with Play Their Way. Is it a case of totally rewiring the way that these coaches operate, or do you think it's a case of a few tweaks? Do you think everyone's capable of, I like the way you call it a movement, we like to call it a movement too. Do you think it's a case of everyone can get on board with this?
I think everybody can get on board with it because it's simple.
Yeah.
It, at the heart of it, voice, choice and journey are 3 small words that mean so much. And I don't think there's any coach out there who doesn't respect the children or young people that they are coaching. No coach goes out to do a bad job, ever. We as coaches just sometimes have bad days. Mm-hmm. And so I think with a movement like Play Their Way, it is I guess it's helping us to get some tools and some techniques out there to some coaches who are really needing it. I talked earlier about that, you're a solo, you're isolated. How do we reach those isolated coaches and make them feel a part of something bigger than they are? So they've got resources they can pick up and, read. But more importantly, coaches they can go and reflect with and help them to kind of develop themselves. There's nothing better than having a coach who's being listened to by another coach who's been there before and struggled. I talk about the club and how great we are, absolutely. But we've been through some tough times trying to work through this movement of play and, putting it out there. And I'm sure there are people who are, look at us and go, oh, but it's not for us because we are a performance pathway but, I would certainly argue that it's for everybody. It's for everyone on a performance pathway. It's for everybody who are working with, little tiny children in the playground. It's for everybody.
Have you seen eureka and enlightenment moments for coaches on the programme as they've realised how a child-first approach benefits the individual child and the wider group?
So one of my colleagues earlier in the year, we put on, it's not a coach, but earlier in the year, we put on a school games programme for young people. And we were trying to shape it. And our conversation, we basically said, we need young people's voices in here. Mm-hmm. We don't know what they want from this event, so let's go and ask them. And so we went into a couple of local schools and essentially just asked a few questions. And my colleague was quite understandably nervous about doing this, but did brilliantly. And she's been sharing her story with Youth Sport Trust recently, because obviously she went on a journey herself in talking to these children and then building the event around it and then sharing that journey with those children again at the very end and how they, to show how they'd helped sort of create this space for these young people. And I think that was definitely a eureka moment for her and for me to see it happen in voice, choice and journey all in one go. And it wasn't comfortable at times, but it was really powerful.
Yeah. Why do you think children's self-advocacy is so important in sport specifically?
I think when a child goes out, puts themselves out there and plays a sport, if they are unable to really understand their why of doing it and feel confident to ask that question or explore that actually, they're going to drop out because they won't understand the deeper meaning of it for them. So for me, it's about that child really understanding why they do something. If they love it and they are progressing at their pace, then they'll stick with it. And they'll stick with it for life. Now, don't get me wrong, they might drop out of that sport, but they'll go and join something else. And we talk about that, it's physical activity for life. It's not just for childhood. Yeah. If we don't enable those children to really connect with and understand why they love sport and love moving, then we'll have far more problems in the future. So, for me, I think self-advocacy of that child is that they understand why they do this and what they get from it. And that could just be that they're connecting with their mates. Yeah. And that's absolutely fine. And as coaches, we need to understand that too. They might not be there because they're going to be the next, in cycling terms, next Tom Pidcock or Evie Richards. They're going to be, just themselves. Yeah. Riding their bike, having fun.
So I want to take it back to the pump track. I've been desperate to take it back to the pump track. And looking forward to coming down at some point myself. But one thing that I think is a concern for coaches, no matter what the sport is safety and risk factors. And that's the same across all sports, but in mountain biking, it's especially so. So how do you manage and balance that with children's decision making and giving them free rein?
I think it's another really good question, and one that we talk about all the time actually in our work. Both on the park but also at Active Gloucestershire. We need to create spaces that are safe for children to play. We need to enable them to feel safe and be safe. And those are two different things, but feeling safe and being safe are the two kind of overriding things that we need to look at when we risk assess something. So if we go to a place, we need to look at it and go, what are the risks here for that young person? And it could be, falling off their bike. It could be that it's an open area. They could run away. You've got sort of, the boundaries. So it's about understanding what those risks are. But there's also a balance of risk. So what is the risk of us not going? Because you could look at the pump track and go, it's just too risky. There are too many opportunities for a child to fall off, to hurt themselves, to get lost, if we're on the trails, all of those things. So, of course, you're going to put through all the mitigation actions to make sure that doesn't happen, or you don't do it. If you don't do it, that's even more of a risk. Mm-hmm. Because of the balance of risk that comes out, if we don't enable these children to go to these places and play and find their limitations for themselves in a safe environment with coaches who care about them, then something's going to happen when there's nobody around. And that's far worse, I think, than actually sort of creating those spaces for them.
Through the cycling club and through the coaching groups, by using a child-first approach, do you think you've built greater levels of trust with the participants and the kids and the young people so that when it does come to things like party at the pump track, they feel trusted and they feel like they can self-advocate and go and do what they want to do, and they know that they're trusted to do it in a safe manner?
Yes, absolutely. When you're trying a new skill at the pump track, you're trying to get your bike in the air, for example, you're trying to jump the tabletop or rail the berm, and inherently there are risks in doing that, but we hope to coach them the skills in order to be able to do it. When they're at the pump track, they're left to their own devices, but there are children of all ages at the pump track. So you've got 6-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and they all support and encourage one another. And what I love about the sessions and what I see is those older children aren't encouraging the younger ones to get out of their comfort zone. They're encouraging them to take one small step to their limit. They will have watched those young people and said, you can do that, I trust you. And this is a 16, 17-year-old talking to a 10, 11-year-old. And because of that belief in themselves and that trust that they've built up between those two, they'll go and try it. But they're doing it in a space that is inherently safe. The older young leaders will be stood right next to them. I've got you, I'll catch you. Yeah. All of those kind of that lovely language that is used. And I think that's what I feel so powerful about those sessions is they are doing this for themselves. A child won't put themselves so much out of their comfort zone that they hurt themselves. Accidents happen, but they won't put themselves in danger. And the older riders that we have around them would never encourage that. It's all really supportive. And I think that's what I love about what's been created at the club, because they're all very supportive of that.
I've asked a lot of guests at the beginning of these pods the same question, but I've saved it until towards the end for you because I know you're a great advocate for it. So what I want to know is, what does play mean to you?
Play is joy. It's inherent in everything that we do, as everything I do. So as an adult, I want to be playful. As a coach, I want to be playful because it brings me so much happiness. Play is a space where you can create, you can learn, you can just have fun. And I think it's because it's all of those things and more. That's why I think play is so important.
I love that answer. That was a lovely chat, and thank you for your time, Nicky. And thank you for listening at home. We hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.